So if you were a church on Sunday, you will have been introduced to a topic or a series we've entitled Greater Than. And in a moment, I'll give you the scripture that helps us define the basis for that title. The objective of this series that we'll be going through together over the next 7 or 8 weeks is to teach us how to have joyful, connecting, happy relationships, not only with people, but with our work environment, our mission and call in life, being single and happy, being in circumstances that make us happy and joyful, and being able to bring happiness and joy to other people's lives. Part of that discussion has a lot to do with how you feel about yourself in environments of relationship and how you feel about other people connecting to you. I wonder if any of you have ever been in the situation where you've said to yourself, I can't believe I said that, when you just finished a conversation. Or you agreed to do something and then wish afterwards you hadn't. Ever agreed to want to go to a party, event, work event, help somebody move? That's more recent, right? And then thought to yourself afterwards, I can't believe I did that. Ever been in a circumstance where you avoid people because they either make you really stressed or they bring out the worst in you? Ever know people like that? Or maybe you feel like you're like that a bit. Whenever you're around certain people, you bring out the worst in them, or you bring out the best in them. We're going to talk about what that looks like and how we grow in that space. And I guess the best way to define the idea of the Greater Than series is to talk about 1 John chapter 4 and verse 3. The Bible says, you are of God because you have overcome the world, and the Amplified Bible says, or worldliness, and because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. So the principle we want to talk about is the stuff God has put in you has made you greater than the environment you find yourself in. Can you recognize that? Can you have dominion over the circumstances you're in a healthy way and let other people experience you as strong, as mature, as capable, without being forceful, without being arrogant, or without being inferior? So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in our own lives, and then what that looks like in the lives of people around us. So we're going to introduce to you a couple of terms that are really important to help you recognize that. If you're at church on Sunday, you probably already know some of these terms. We're going to talk to you about whether you feel powerful as a person, or whether you feel weaker in your personal capacity. And that term, being a powerful person or being a powerless person, becomes really important in understanding how you respond to people, to your job, to your marriage, to your circumstances, and even to yourself, how you feel about yourself and the way you respond. If you ever get married, I say that for the single people in the room, or if you've ever been married or are already married, this might make good sense to you. When you're standing at an altar and the pastor says to you, do you take so-and-so to be your lawfully wedded wife, what's the response you expect? I do. How would you feel if the pastor said, do you take so-and-so to be your lawfully, let me use me as an example. George, do you take Hope? For those of you who don't know the context, I'm single and my team are laughing at me. Do you take Hope to be your lawfully wedded wife? If I say, I'll do my best, that would not be a good response. If she said, I'll try, in response to the question, will you take George to be your lawfully wedded husband? Gosh, I look forward to that. And she said, I'll try. How many of you immediately recognize most people would raise their eyebrows and go, that's not going to work? And yet in a lot of environments in our personal life, we are not confident to say, yes, I will, or no, I won't. We land up in that gray, powerless area where we say, I'll try my best. I'll see what I can do, hopefully. And instead of being able to be in an environment where we feel strong about something, either strong to say yes and commit to it and actually do it, or strong to say no and not cause offense, instead of that, we put ourselves in the gray area, and then we hope that before the event arises, something comes up. How many of you are confident enough in yourself to admit that you said yes to something, and then you start working out your exit strategy before the event. You recognize that? Like the day of the event, you start thinking, okay, so possibly it could be the weather, but then the weather has to be really bad, and if it isn't the weather, then you kind of hope there's news of a traffic jam, or it's just so that you can slowly, by the start of the day, you sort of start the escalation of exit. Why can't you just say no when you're not keen? And why can you say yes? Can't you say yes when you are and stick to it? There's something about your ability to feel like you have overcome, you are greater than, without causing hurt and offense and insecurity. And that happens not only in marriage. Single people will agree to this. You feel obligated, you feel compelled, you feel pressurized. When you're in a work environment, you've got to work out the lines between your boss asking you because it's got to be done and him asking you because he's just in charge of you and likes being in charge of you. And so there's this distance between what you have to do and what he wants you to do. You've got to figure all of that out. And this series is designed to help you make those connections. Our topic of discussion, especially for our first message, is from 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 7. It's a really well-known scripture. It says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind." So I want to encourage you that you have love, power, and a sound mind given to you by the Spirit of God, and you have a responsibility to make those three things work together in equal proportion, right? Because we recognize that we can't just have power and no love. It will cause relational injury, we cause internal anxiety, we put ourselves in environments of unhappiness. We've got lots of power but no love. But then you've also got to have a sound mind. You've got to have a mind that's not influenced by feelings of insecurity or past experience. You've got to be sound in your mind, strong in your spirit, and operating from a platform of biblical godly love. And biblical godly love doesn't say yes to everything. Biblical godly love knows how to say no to some things and still keep the relationship. And that's the objective of the discussion. How do you maintain a personal power? You have personal power. How do you keep that? Don't give it away. Don't lose it so that you become powerless, a term that's really important in this series, in this conversation, while at the same time keeping your personal power and operating in love and a clear and sound mind. And all of us are either operating with strength or weakness in this area. And I guess the discussion is to try and persuade each of us to be good stewards of that verse and what it gives us. Love, how good a steward are you of your love levels? Power, how good a steward are you of how strong I feel as a person? Not aggressive, not dictatorial, just strong. Just strong. If you've been around strong people, they have a really powerful effect on you. They make you feel safe, make you feel confident. Wives will tell you in the counseling room that when their husbands are strong, they feel a safety to be themselves. When strength becomes abnormal, either abusive or too weak, then it forces everybody around you to adjust. And that adjustment isn't always healthy. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about how to maintain your personal power in the capacity of being strong, loving, and of sound mind. And here's the thing. There are three possible scenarios that all of us can find ourselves in. And some of us find ourselves in a few of them depending on the type of people we're around. First of all, if you're a strong person, your language will tell me that you're a strong person. You can say things like yes and mean it, and no and mean it. You don't get into the gray area. We all have friends who say yes and we know they mean no. We all have those friends, right? They say things that let you know it's probably not going to happen. For example, if you invite a mate and say, hey, come on over for a get-together on the weekend, and they go, I'll see how it goes. There's a pretty good chance they're not coming. Because their language tells you they're not there in that space. So a powerful person is a person who, according to Timothy 1:7, declares that we have a Spirit of God in us that does not give us a spirit of fear or anxiety, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And by the way, that verse helps us define those as two opposites, and you'll want to know that, because if you're feeling strong, you're not feeling fearful or anxious. And if you're feeling powerless, you increase the level of your anxiety, the level of your fear. And when you operate from that, you make decisions out of fear rather than out of strength. And so that verse becomes a critical thing in being able to define how that process works. So if you're a powerful person, and you're in relationships with other powerful people, you're able to define your relationships more clearly. If you're a powerful person and you're in a relationship with somebody who's powerless, then you define your relationship in a different way. So a good example of that will be the following. If you feel strong and good and you're in relationships with people who feel weak and inferior, then one of you controls the other. And then you have a relationship that is control-based rather than a relationship that is truly beneficial and mutually beneficial to each party. And think about the relationships in your life. Are you in an environment where you are strong and the people around you are strong? Or do you prefer to have people in your life who are powerless and you are controlling them? Or do you feel powerless and you let other people or things control you? That's an environment worth considering. The second idea is that if you are a powerless person and you are part of another powerless relationship, instead of allowing both of you to develop some kind of strength, it becomes abusive. So two powerless people working together in the same environment, two powerless people in the same church, cell group, small group, or discussion group, something like the one you're in today, in the same work environment or marriage, will end up abusing one another because you're looking to each other for something that the other can't provide. Ever been in a friendship or a marriage or a relationship where you think to yourself, no matter what I do, it won't be enough? It's just not good enough, ever good enough. It's just never satisfying enough. Just when you think you've done whatever you need to do to make that person happy, there's something else you've missed or forgotten. And that powerless environment never seems to come together properly. If you're powerful and you're in a relationship with another person who's powerful, in other words, you say yes and you mean it, or no and you mean it, and you're comfortable to do that without fearing that your relationships will end or fearing that your church life will be unpleasant, then those two connections together create free relationships, where you do things because you choose to and are happy to rather than you feel like you have to. And that's a critical part of this discussion. If you feel like any of the others, then one is a victim and the other is an abuser or a controller. When both are healthy and strong, then you're free. You're free from abusive environments, you're free from controlling environments, and you're free to keep the connections good. So here's one of the objectives you'll want to discuss when this group conversation goes into Q&A time. You want to discuss, how good are you at keeping your connections healthy? Are you afraid that if you say no, it'll end the relationship? Or are you afraid that if you don't agree with everything, it'll cause someone to withdraw? Do you withdraw from a relationship when you don't get everything you want all the time? Because if you do, then you might be implementing powerless behavior because you feel weak. Does that make sense? I really want to encourage you to try and figure out in your own space which of those things you fall in. There's something that's really important that happens, particularly if you are kind of in the powerless category, which is the category of people who can't say yes and mean it, no and mean it, and be able to do so with happiness, joy, feel connected to people. Here's what happens. If you're powerless, then you usually have two kinds of people in your life. You usually have somebody to blame, a bad guy. So just think about that in your own life. The reason why I am the way I am is because my father, my cell group leader, I hope not. My pastor, definitely not. My ex-wife, my current wife, my dog, my boss. It's somebody's fault that you are not happy. If it's somebody else's fault that you are not happy, then you are a victim, and all victims look for an abuser or bad guy. And then the other thing that happens when you get into that environment, a kind of a triangulation takes place. The only way you see yourself being happy is if somebody else rescues you. So you're the victim, somebody is the cause of your victimization, some bad guy, and somebody else must come and rescue. Do you see how both of those things, the source of your unhappiness and the source of your happiness, are external? Somebody else has to do it. And that makes you a victim. And you will never be happy. You will never feel genuinely connected to your husband or your wife. You won't feel connected to your work because it's somebody else's job to make you happy in your work, your boss. Or it's somebody else's fault why you're not happy. And the moment you deflect those two things outside of yourself, the cause and the solution comes from outside of your own relationship with Christ, you will remain unhappy. And there's a good chance that whoever you're looking to or blaming will not be able to meet that need. And that's a really, really important idea. We don't want to create an environment where nobody wants anyone in their lives. Exactly the opposite. If you remember in Genesis, it is not good for man to be alone. So right in the very beginning of the creation story, God looked upon man and said, you need to be connected with what? People, yes, a husband and a wife, that's a connection. But that wasn't the only connection. So championing the cause of single people, you also had to be connected to the land. Hey, Adam, this is your Eden. You also had to be connected to your responsibility. Name everything in the Eden, till the soil, make it fruitful, have dominion. So you have a connection to your work. You have a connection to your purpose. You have a connection to a space. You have a connection to other people and other things that share your space. And of course, the ultimate connection, marriage. It's not good for us not to be connected, but we can't be connected if our level of personal power is broken and we are in powerless or victim mindset. Everybody understand that? That makes sense to you? And so it becomes really important that you avoid this triangle of abuse, this environment where somebody is to blame and somebody else is to solve. Because if you do that, you will always remain personally powerless. And the scripture that God it gives us a spirit of love, power, and a sound mind in response to a spirit of fear comes into play, and you will live your life in anxiety. If you expect someone else to solve things, what if they stop? What if they leave you? What if the job changes? What if it disappears? It's temporary. You want a permanent state of connecting, of joy, and of happiness. And that comes from the Spirit of God. That's a biblical, spiritual concept that God puts in our hearts and nobody else can do. Even being connected to a good church, you're in a good church. If you're connected to a good church, it's going to meet a certain amount of need. But if you're a victim in church, waiting for a pastor or a program to meet your happiness level, that's never going to happen. And you're going to look to other people to blame. It's their fault. And so you remain a victim in that environment. And so I want to encourage you to evaluate how you respond to yourself and other people, and then define, am I powerful in the biblical sense? Am I powerless and therefore a victim? Do I blame and ascribe other people the reason why I'm unhappy? Do I look for my happiness from some other source? Where does it come from? Here's the key idea we want to encourage you to talk about. How do you move from being a victim to being a volunteer? That everything you're doing or are involved in your life, you choose to. So here's the definition of a great connection, is when two people equally choose to be connected to one another. Let me use your relationship with God as a great example. John 15 tells us that God chose us. He chose you. And do you know when you have a great connection with God? When you choose Him back. Lord, I acknowledge you chose me to be a child of God, and I choose to be obedient to you, and because I'm choosing a response and you're choosing to initiate, we have a good connection. You won't have a good connection with God if you know He chooses you, but you can't respond voluntarily by choice to respond back to Him. And that's the idea we want to encourage in every kind of relationship. If somebody is in a relationship with you, work relationship, being in an environment of friends or marriage, you've got to have a decision free from emotional conflict to be in good, healthy connections. You've got to make some choices. So here's the thing you've got to think about. Everything you're in right now, you've chosen to be in. Was that choice healthy? Is that choice still healthy? And do you know how to keep it healthy? The idea there is really simple. I choose what I'm involved in and what I withdraw from, and I'm only responsible for myself. I'll look after me, and you look after you. I'll make the choices that are healthy and honoring for me, and I'll present them to you, and I will not be offended by your response. If somebody outside of you chooses to have a shallower relationship with you, you don't have the right to be offended at that. You only have the ability to control you. And to prevent relationships, environments, and circumstances from entering into powerless or abusive or victimized relationships, you got to acknowledge, I'm really only able to manage me. So in a powerful, powerful relationship, I manage me and you manage you. And that remains healthy. The moment I'm managing you, I'm unhealthy. And the moment you need somebody to manage you in order to feel happy, you're unhealthy. And so you want to ensure that you get your relationships in the happy zone. If I'm empowered and I meet bad guys to blame, I simply create boundaries and walk away. I don't allow their influence over my life because I'm managing me and you can manage you. And the objective is to arrive at this definition. What is a powerful person? A powerful person is somebody who can take responsibility for their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own feelings, and their own actions, irrespective of what anybody else does around them. So you're free from the influence of people around. You choose your responses in the areas of the thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions, and you're free to do so because you feel personally empowered by God. And if you can arrive at that kind of definition, you can be happy no matter where you are. And you can also be connected appropriately with the right people in the right places in the right way. My objective in our conversation here is to help you recognize what a powerful person looks like and what a powerless person looks like, to recognize the difference between a victim and a volunteer, and to help you define for yourself your response reactions to every connection in your life, whether it is marriage, work, single life, or church life. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much.